Thomas Friedman believes at the New York Times that there's a correlation with the price of oil and freedom around the world, that the high oil prices, and Freedom House says the Middle East is where they're most troublesome. Do you think that the price of oil and what he calls Petro-Dictators, does that have an influence on freedom, or is that not one of the factors you're...
Well, I think that there has been a correlation between the hunt for natural resources, primarily oil, and the attitudes taken by governments that have those resources to husband them and protect them. But I don't think it's just that. There are other aspects of societies that are rooted in their own history and culture that contribute to that. But it is fair to say that there's a so-called oil curse, because when countries discover oil, start marketing that oil, if they're not thoughtful, if they're not visionary, very often it becomes a small elite that benefits from it. The benefits are not broadly shared, and the progress of democracy and freedom is halted. And the necessity for democracy to deliver services for people in order to maintain the support for a new democracy is unfortunately diminished. So there is certainly a connection. In some places, it's more obvious than others.
You talked about development as a key priority. Recently, the United States announced a directive on global development that was aimed on market forces, self-reliance. You know, how is this going to be different? You said that the 70s were the glory years for economic or foreign aid, and then aid lost its way. So how is this really going to be different than past reforms of the aid mechanism?
Well, it's going to be a much more comprehensive effort to rebuild USAID as the premier development agency in the world. And in order to do that, we have to have a clear focus of our mission. And in the President's speech at the United Nations a few weeks ago in connection with the Millennium Development Goals Summit, the President laid out a focus on trying to enhance economic growth, build middle classes around the world, because that does correlate with stability and increasing political freedom and democracy historically. It also means, though, doing a really hard scrub of USAID. And Dr. Raj Shah, who is the new administrator, and I are working very closely to really change procurement policies, personnel policies, try to streamline the delivery of aid. I'll give you an example. We have 24 different agencies in our government that provide some sort of aid, some sort of development aid. And it makes it difficult to speak with an authoritative voice in a country and to avoid redundancy and duplication. So if you're an African woman in a rural part of a country in sub-Saharan Africa, and perhaps you're HIV positive, well, you may be able to go one place and get antiretrovirals from PEPFAR. You may go to another place and with a USAID program get your children immunized. You may go to another place to try to get health care for pregnancy and labor and delivery. And you may go to another place and try to get help with your crops to get fertilizer and seed. And we have all these parallel structures. And the problem is that if you're an ambassador in a country, or if you're the Secretary of State, if you call everybody who works either directly for the United States government or on contract from the United States government who's working in development to come together, as I have done in the past, I can guarantee you that the people in the room often don't even know each other and rarely work with each other. And at some point, that is not a sustainable model, because in our own tough budget times, I have to be able to not just come and speak to the Commonwealth Club, but also make the case to the American public and the American Congress that these investments are in furtherance of our security, values, and interests, and that we're going to be good stewards of those tax dollars. So we are looking to, through the QDDR, the Quadrennial Diplomacy and Development Review that we'll be rolling out before the end of the year, we are looking to start in motion reforms in how we do this business that will actually give us more impact for what we do and be very good stewards of the tax dollars that are provided to us.
Can you change the org chart? I mean, a lot of that, people talk about cross-agency collaboration, but until you change the reporting structure, is it really going to change?
Well, I'll give you one example. One of my priorities and the President's priorities was to figure out how to rationalize and better coordinate what we did to end hunger and promote food security. So starting right after I got there, I asked my Chief of Staff, Cheryl Mills, to run a government-wide process, which meant bringing the Department of Agriculture in, it meant bringing the Millennium Challenge Corporation in, it meant bringing other agencies that have contact with people in, and we came up with a program we're calling Feed the Future. And it was hard. I'm not going to sit here and say that it was easily done. It was quite challenging to get everybody in the same room talking about their contribution and how we could better focus what we were doing to deliver results. But at the end of the process, we came out with a program that is going to focus on improving agriculture so that people can become more self-sufficient themselves. USAID, the State Department, Department of Agriculture, and then other agencies, we are working in a collaborative fashion. In fact, that's where I met Raj Shah, because he was in the Department of Agriculture and was their designated person to come to these meetings. And so we are working very hard. Now, bureaucracy is a challenge, no matter where you find it. And we are conscious of that. And you can't just turn some key and change things overnight. But we have emphasized our Feed the Future initiative. We've emphasized better organizing global health because we have USAID, we have the State Department, we have Health and Human Services, we have the Centers for Disease Control, we have PEPFAR, we have all these other groups that are working on this. And then we have a third whole of government initiative on climate change. So we want to try to change the way our own government functions and then change the way other governments function and then deliver services in ways that make sense to people within their own, cultural and political atmosphere.